The first shot wasn't fired from a gun, it came from a voice wrapped in pearls and politeness. Your military background makes people uncomfortable, Colonel. Maybe you should leave. My name is Colonel Samuel Reynolds, retired. 25 years in uniform. A purple heart carved into my skin, not my resume. And the woman saying this, my daughter's new mother-in-law at the wedding I paid for. But that insult was only a prelude. The real bullet came from my own blood. Emily, my daughter, my only child, turned to me in front of 150 guests and said, "Dad, your money was invited. You weren't." I stood there in full dress, blues medals glinting under chandelier lights surrounded by people who mistook wealth for worth. They saw a soldier and felt discomfort, not respect. They saw service and thought shame, not sacrifice. What they didn't know is that I don't just write checks. I build systems. I control things. And tonight they were standing inside one of them. 3 months earlier, my daughter had called me for the first time in almost a year. Her voice was soft, polite, like she was calling a client she didn't want to offend. "Dad, the Davenport family backed out of their half. We might have to cancel everything. Cancel everything, the wedding, the symbol of her perfect new life." I didn't hesitate. "How much do you need?" There was a pause, the kind that reveals guilt. 95,000. I transferred it the same afternoon. Not because I had to, but because that's what fathers do when their daughters call in distress. I thought it might fix something, that maybe love could be wired through a bank transfer. That illusion lasted exactly 3 months. When I wired the money, I didn't tell her that Reynolds Defense Solutions cleared more than $30 million a year, that a single contract with the Pentagon was worth 10 of her weddings, because that wasn't the point. The point was that I still believed in family, that fragile word that means everything until you see how cheap it becomes in certain rooms. Emily had grown up in base housing, eating reheated dinners when I was home between deployments. Her mother couldn't handle the separations. The divorce was clean on paper, brutal in memory. I sent alimony, birthday gifts, tuition checks. I missed recitals, graduations, a few firsts that no medal could replace. But I kept the one promise I'd made to that little girl in pigtails who used to wear my old dog tags to school. I'll always have your back. When she told me she was marrying Andrew Davenport, I did my research the way I always do, quietly, thoroughly. The Davenports were East Coast money, inherited wealth, stretching back to textile mills and political dinners. Andrew was a venture consultant, which in plain English meant a trust fund with a laptop. His mother, Victoria Davenport, chaired 3 charity boards and treated every social interaction like a chess move. I knew what I was walking into, a battlefield with champagne instead of sand. But soldiers don't retreat before a reconnaissance. I bought a new tuxedo, polished my medals, and promised myself I'd be on my best behavior. The rehearsal dinner should have been a celebration. Instead, it was the first warning shot. Victoria approached me near the bar, her smile flawless, practiced. "Colonel Reynolds, isn't it? I hear you're in security work now." "Defense consulting," I said. "My company helps navigate federal contracts." "How fascinating," she replied, tone dripping with amusement. "And you were in the military 25 years. "I see. Well, I do hope tomorrow's reception won't have too many war stories. The Davenports value sophistication." I sipped my bourbon. "Ma'am, sophistication and service aren't mutually exclusive." Her laugh was light, brittle. "Of course not. Still, perhaps tone it down for Emily's sake." I should have seen it then, the coded language, the condescension disguised as etiquette. But you learn after years in uniform to pick your battles. Some insults aren't worth your ammunition, or so I thought. The next morning, as the sun spilled through the stained glass windows of the chapel, Emily took me aside. Her eyes darted nervously toward Victoria. "Dad, about your speech tonight. What about it Mrs. Davenport thinks maybe Andrew's father should handle the toast? It's just simpler." I felt the weight of that word, simpler. It meant less embarrassing. "Emily," I said quietly, "I'm your father. I know Dad. It's just complicated. His family's paying for the honeymoon and the house down payment." I nodded, though the room blurred for a second. I'd seen men die in deserts with less pain than that single sentence. The ceremony was beautiful, flawless even. Emily looked radiant, walking down the aisle, and for a moment every doubt I'd had dissolved. That's what fathers do, we forgive silently, because our pride is smaller than our love. At the reception, I wore my dress blues. I wasn't showing off. I was honoring 25 years of service, 3 tours overseas, and the memory of people who didn't come home. But to them, the guests, the Davenports, I wasn't a father. I was a curiosity, a prop in uniform. I caught fragments of whispered words, decorations, combat so intense. To people like Victoria, the world was divided into those who inherited safety and those who purchased it with blood. During dinner, she leaned across the table, her tone syrup sweet. You must find civilian life quite different. Different mission, same principles, I said. And what principles are those? Integrity, accountability, mission first. How admirable, she said, her lips tightening. But surely civilian society requires more sophisticated thinking. 8 people went silent. I could hear the ocean outside steady and cold. Ma'am, I said calmly, polite society exists because people like me protected it. The words hung there, heavy as lead. For a moment, even Victoria had no reply. That night, as the orchestra played and Emily laughed among her new in-laws, I realized what I was really funding. Not a wedding, not a future. I was underwriting a transformation, the quiet erasure of everything I represented. And in that silence, as I watched her turn away from me to pose for photos with the Davenports, I understood what kind of war I was in now. Not one fought with bullets or tactics, but with status. And this time, the battlefield was my own family. Dinner began at 7:30 sharp. Prime rib lobster tail plates that cost more than a week's groceries for most families. I was seated at the parents' table directly across from the Davenports. I could feel the temperature drop every time I opened my mouth. Andrew's father, William Davenport Sr., carved his meat with surgical precision. Colonel Reynolds, he began, his tone polite but sharp. Victoria tells me you're in the security business, defense consulting, I said. We help companies navigate military contracts. He smiled thinly. Must be quite different from your army days. Different mission, same principles. Victoria leaned forward, eyes gleaming. And what principles are those? Integrity, accountability, mission first. How admirable, she said softly, though civilian life often demands subtler forms of leadership, less black and white. The table fell silent. 8 pairs of eyes studied their plates. I set my fork down. You mean less integrity? Victoria's smile froze. I mean understanding that perception matters, in business and in society. Then what perception are you managing right now, Mrs. Davenport? I asked. That military service is something to hide. Her mask cracked just a hairline fracture. I'm simply suggesting that some experiences translate better to polite society than others. Like wedding receptions funded by people who've seen impolite things, I said quietly so you don't have to. The silence stretched heavy and deliberate. For a moment, no one dared breathe. Then Victoria dabbed her lips with a napkin. How passionate. You must forgive us, Colonel. Not everyone enjoys discussing combat over dinner. Don't worry, I said, my voice even. I never discuss combat, only character. Across the table, Emily avoided my eyes. That hurt more than any insult in the room. She was retreating into silence, the kind that doesn't protect but betrays. By dessert, the polite distance between us had turned into open isolation. The laughter at the table excluded me by design. Victoria had achieved what every tactician seeks: control of the narrative. I'd become the inconvenient relic, the soldier who didn't know how to behave in civilized company. When the music began, the first dance belonged to Emily and Andrew. Their smiles perfect, the lighting flawless. I waited for my turn, the father-daughter dance, my one small piece of the evening. Emily approached me halfway through the song. Dad, about the dance. Andrew's father suggested we make it a family moment, all the parents together. Your choice, I said. The words were calm, but I felt something break inside. The dance that followed wasn't a family moment. It was a performance. Victoria and William led, beaming like royalty at a coronation. Emily followed their rhythm, careful not to step out of line. I danced with Andrew's sister, a polite distraction, a social decoy. When the music stopped, the applause felt like gunfire. The photographer's flash froze every moment, and in each picture, I was just out of frame. The speeches came next. William Davenport spoke about heritage, legacy, continuity. Victoria followed, praising Emily for embracing the family's values. The applause lasted longer than the vows. Emily took the microphone. Her voice trembled slightly at first, then steadied into the polished cadence of someone who'd rehearsed this moment. "I want to thank everyone for being here," she said. "This has been the most perfect day of my life." She thanked the Davenports for welcoming her, the guests for attending, the staff for their service. My name never crossed her lips. The people who'd heard my company name whispered during the rehearsal dinner were watching. They knew I'd paid for half of this event. They knew exactly who she'd forgotten. When the applause died, the room began to fragment into conversations again, but a few guests approached me offering awkward smiles. "Beautiful speech, Colonel." "When's your toast?" one man asked. "I'm not giving one," I said. Surprise, confusion, pity. Words spread like smoke. Within minutes, half the room knew the father wasn't allowed to speak. I could feel Victoria's eyes on me from across the room. Predatory, confident. The queen who believed she'd silence the soldier. I went to the bar. Third bourbon of the evening, neat 2 fingers. The bartender, a quiet man with the posture of a veteran, said nothing. He didn't need to. We recognized each other by the way we carried our scars. Victoria appeared beside me, perfume sharp as her tone. "Colonel, I think we need to clear the air." "Do we?" "Yes. You seem agitated. Some of our guests are uncomfortable." "Which guests?" "Several have mentioned it." "Names?" "I don't think names, Mrs. Davenport." Her composure wavered. "It's not about individuals, it's about atmosphere. You seem intense." "Intense," I repeated. "You mean alive." She pressed on. "I'm trying to help Emily transition smoothly into her new life, by cutting out the people who got her there, by helping her understand what her new position requires, maintaining appropriate relationships with appropriate people." The bartender stopped polishing his glass. The nearby tables went quiet. Every veteran in that room understood what was happening. "Appropriate people," I said slowly. "Like you. Like people who share similar values. And I don't. You have different experiences. You see, Colonel, trauma leaves marks. Not everyone knows how to process that." "You think I'm dangerous?" "I think you make people nervous." "People," I said, meaning your friends, the ones who've never served a day in their lives. She looked around nervously. "Please keep your voice down." I smiled. "Don't worry, Mrs. Davenport. I learned long ago that raising your voice is a sign you've already lost the argument." Emily approached, then her face pale. "Dad, what's going on?" I didn't answer. I wanted her to hear it from Victoria. "Your father," Victoria said sweetly, "is having trouble adjusting to the new family dynamic." "New family dynamic?" Emily asked. "Yes, darling. You're a Davenport now, with different expectations." Something in Emily's eyes shifted, guilt or recognition, I couldn't tell. Then came the words that completed the betrayal. "Dad, maybe you should go." The room froze. The string quartet faltered mid-note. Someone laughed nervously, mistaking silence for civility. "Kelly." I caught myself. "Emily," I said, my voice low. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No, Dad. You're embarrassing me. By asking for respect, by making this about you." Victoria's satisfied smirk glimmered like polished silver behind her. Emily's voice grew steadier, colder. "Your money was invited tonight. You weren't." That was the shot. Precise, practiced, devastating. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. The soldier exposed the father, stripped of dignity by his own blood. I could have shouted. I could have stormed out. Instead, I smiled, the kind of smile that once made enemy combatants reconsider their next move. "You're absolutely right," I said. "My money was invited. I wasn't." I reached into my jacket and pulled out my phone. "But there's something you should know about this evening." "Who are you calling?" Emily asked. "The general manager." 30 seconds later, Laura Pierce, the club's executive director, appeared calm and professional. "Colonel Reynolds," she said. "Beautiful event tonight." "Indeed," I replied, "though I think it's time for full disclosure." I took the microphone from the DJ, my voice steady as command. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, "I owe you transparency. My name is Colonel Samuel Reynolds, United States Army retired, and I'm the corporate sponsor who keeps this venue alive." Gasps rippled through the hall. For 3 years, Reynolds Defense Solutions has contributed $500,000 annually to this club. We fund veteran employment programs, sponsor community outreach, and maintain the facilities you're enjoying tonight. A murmur swept through the guests. Cameras rose. Emily's face drained of color. But tonight I continued. I've learned that my presence, and by extension, the presence of every veteran who works here, makes certain people uncomfortable. So in the spirit of accommodation, I'll be leaving. And I'll take my money with me. The room exploded into whispers. The Davenports froze pale as porcelain. Effective immediately, I said, handing a folder to Laura Pierce. Reynolds Defense Solutions withdraws all financial support in associated contracts. Sir Laura stammered, "Please no, ma'am. Some lines once crossed stay crossed." Then to my daughter, my little girl who'd once called me her hero, I said softly, "You wanted your father gone. Now he's gone, along with everything he built here." The moment I stepped out of that ballroom, the air changed. Inside, you could feel the panic ripple through the crowd, waiters whispering, guests murmuring, phones lighting up. Outside, it was quiet. The ocean wind off Virginia Beach carried that clean, cold stillness I'd missed since my deployment days. My team moved like they always did, efficient, wordless, disciplined. "Staff Sergeant Brooks," I said. "Yes, sir. Redeploy the team. Perimeter secure. Full withdrawal." "Understood, sir." In 10 minutes, they were gone. Not a single word of protest. Not a raised voice. Just order, obedience, and silence, the kind of silence that follows a mission well executed. I stood in the parking lot for a moment, looking back through the tall glass windows of the reception hall. Inside, the Davenports were scrambling, huddled in tight circles of confusion. Emily was crying, though I couldn't hear it through the glass. And for the first time in years, I didn't rush to comfort her. You see, when you spend your life commanding soldiers, you learn something vital. No lesson truly lands until it costs something real. I had just made sure tonight would cost everyone something. Within an hour, my phone started buzzing. First from the club's management, then from vendors, then from journalists who'd gotten wind that a major sponsor had pulled out mid-event. I didn't answer any of them. At 11:48 p.m., I received a text from Emily. "Dad, please come back. We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time, then showed it to Brooks. "What's your assessment, Sergeant, sir?" He said, his voice steady. "That ship has sailed." Agreed. At 11:53, another text arrived. Patricia apologized. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. Then another, the club manager says people will lose jobs if you cancel the contracts. I handed the phone to Corporal Jason Lee. Response, recommendation. "Sir," he said without hesitation, "apologies that come after consequences aren't apologies. They're damage control." He was right. In war and in life, people rarely apologize out of conscience. They apologize out of collapse. At midnight, I typed a final message to Emily. "Emily, some lessons cost more than others. This one cost you a father and the club $500,000 a year. Choose your next words carefully." She replied almost instantly, "That's not fair. I was trying to keep everyone happy. Fair would have been you defending the man who raised you instead of appeasing people who think veterans are embarrassing. They don't think that. They said it out loud in front of witnesses. And you stood beside them." There was a long pause. "Then I just wanted peace." "You don't build peace by sacrificing your principles, Emily. You build it by standing on them." The typing indicator blinked and stopped. No more messages. At 12:07 a.m., the reporter Natalie Harper from Military Times approached me outside the club entrance. She had the kind of face that doesn't flinch at tension, calm, alert, professional. "Colonel Reynolds," she said, "may I ask what message you want this night to send?" I looked at her for a long moment, the ballroom noise echoing faintly behind me. "That respect isn't negotiable," I said. "That military service deserves recognition, not apology, and that no amount of wealth or pedigree excuses disrespect." She nodded, and to your daughter I took a breath. That some prices are too high to pay for acceptance, even family acceptance. Especially family acceptance. Family should be the one place where your worth is in question. By Sunday morning, the story was live. Headline: Colonel withdraws $500,000 sponsorship after wedding insult, veteran community responds. By noon, my office phone was ringing nonstop. The veteran network moves fast. I received 23 calls before lunch. Men and women I hadn't spoken to in years. Soldiers, Marines, sailors, old colleagues, all saying the same thing. You did what we all wish we could have done. On Monday, the dominoes began to fall. The Virginia Beach Country Club's management called first. Laura Pierce's voice cracked through the receiver. Colonel, we need to discuss reinstating the sponsorship. There's nothing to discuss, I said. Sir, please. We're facing an operational crisis. Security coverage failed over the weekend. Emergency contractors are exceeding our budget. The anniversary party and corporate dinner are in jeopardy. We're already down $40,000 in revenue this week. That's what happens, I said, when you bite the hand that feeds you. She hesitated. Sir, this wasn't our decision. It was a guest comment that escalated. It was your venue, I cut in. Your guests. Your responsibility. Could we meet, she asked. Discuss terms, compensation, even a public apology. That word apology lingered in the air. What would that look like, I asked. A full-page statement in the Virginia Pilot, a speech at our next membership meeting. Whatever you recommend. And what would it say that the Virginia Beach Country Club values military service and regrets any misunderstanding? I almost laughed. Misunderstanding, I repeated. Wrong choice of words, Ms. Pierce. Try again. Silence. Then quieter. We regret the disrespectful treatment of veterans and military families. By whom? By the club management. And the Davenport's long pause. That's a separate matter. Of course it is, I said, because they're still members, still using the facilities my company's money maintained. She didn't respond. I hung up. 5 minutes later, another call. Colonel Reynolds, this is William Davenport. Mr. Davenport, I think we got off on the wrong foot Saturday. Did we? Yes. Victoria spoke out of turn. We understand you were offended. Offended isn't the right word. What would be disrespected? He exhaled sharply. We'd like to make amends. The club's crisis affects all of us, or your family's reputation. Look, Colonel Kelly, he caught himself. Emily, she's devastated. She feels she's lost her father. She didn't lose me, Mr. Davenport. She discarded me. He tried again. She was trying to impress people. You know how young couples are. She was trying to impress you by erasing me. The silence on the line was thick enough to touch. Finally, he said, can we move past this? Move past the betrayal, the public humiliation, move past the misunderstanding and rebuild relationships. There was no misunderstanding, Mr. Davenport. Your wife made herself clear. Your family made itself clear. And my daughter chose your approval over her father's respect. Actions have consequences. I simply provided the reminder. He sighed. What would it take to fix this? It can't be fixed, I said. Because some damage isn't financial, it's moral. And you can't repay integrity with a check. When I hung up, the office was silent, except for the hum of the AC and the distant roll of waves. I looked out over the harbor. Cargo ships slid across the horizon, disciplined, deliberate, unmoved by the noise of land. For the first time in years, I felt the same kind of peace I'd known in the desert after a battle, the calm that comes when you've done what had to be done, even if it costs you everything. The Davenports had money, I had silence. And silence, when it's chosen, is power. By Wednesday evening, the entire city had heard. The article had spread from the Military Times to every local paper on the coast. Country Club shamed for disrespecting war veterans. Headlines ran beside my photograph, me standing outside the venue in dress blues, eyes steady expression, unreadable. It wasn't revenge. It was exposure, the kind sunlight brings after too long in shadow. That night I drove to the Tidewater Veterans Association meeting, VFW Post 392. 87 veteran business owners filled the hall, faces lined by duty by life, by the kind of discipline no academy teaches. At the front stood Commander Olivia Grant, Navy, retired 3 tours in the Gulf. She opened the session with the efficiency of a briefing. We're here to discuss the Virginia Beach Country Club incident. Colonel Reynolds, the floor is yours. I stood before them, no script, no theatrics, just facts. I laid out the timeline, the conversation at dinner, the public humiliation, the withdrawal of contracts, the fallout. When I finished, the room stayed silent for a long time. Then a Marine in the back, Staff Sergeant Barnes, I think, raised his hand. Sir, were you angry? No, I said. I was disappointed. Anger's easy. Disappointment means you still expected better. A murmur ran through the crowd. Commander Grant nodded once. Questions, a man near the front spoke. Are other venues acting like this? Unknown, I said. This was my first direct confrontation. What's the impact? Another asked. Immediate loss of 43 veteran jobs. Security catering maintenance. We'll find replacements. Commander Grant turned to the room. Discussion one by one they stood. Men who'd bled for their country, women who'd rebuilt their lives after war, all telling versions of the same story, being treated as inconvenient, unrefined, too intense for polite company. Being invited for what they could contribute, not for who they were. When the last voice sat down, Grant called for a vote. Motion. The Tidewater Veterans Association recommends all member businesses decline contracts with the Virginia Beach Country Club until leadership demonstrates genuine respect for military service. 82 in favor, 3 opposed, 2 abstained. Motion 2. Publish a public list of veteran-friendly venues and businesses for member referrals. Unanimous. Motion 3. Request local media coverage on veteran employment discrimination. 79 in favor. The decision was clear. The Veteran Network would respond not with outrage, but with structure. Quiet, organized consequence. The next morning, the club began to feel the damage. Reynolds Defense Solutions wasn't their only veteran partner. I'd made sure of that years ago. Hampton Security Services, Norfolk Catering Corps, Blue Harbor Maintenance, all veteran-owned, all connected through my network. When one withdrew, the others followed. By Friday, the Virginia Beach Country Club had lost 70% of its vendors. The staff who'd served that wedding, many of them veterans, walked out mid-shift. The board called an emergency meeting, and still no one from the Davenport family had issued a public apology. At 8:03 a.m. on Saturday, my phone rang again. Unknown number, I answered. Dad. Emily. Her voice cracked like glass under pressure. Emily, I need to talk to you. About what? About what I did. About what I lost. About what it's going to cost to fix it. There was a pause long enough to hear the hum of her breathing. Some things can't be fixed, I said, but they can be learned from. Can they, if you're willing to learn? I am, she said quietly, because I need to learn how to be your daughter again. I didn't answer right away. I'd been a commander long enough to know that silence can say more than words. Finally, I said, come to my office. 2:00. When she arrived, she wasn't the immaculate bride anymore. No makeup, no designer dress, just jeans and a wrinkled white shirt. She looked smaller but more real. Dad, she said softly. Sit. She sat across from me at the same desk where I'd hired veterans, signed contracts, built lives. For the first time, she looked around the office like she was seeing it. The plaques, the flags, the photographs of soldiers smiling in desserts half a world away. I read the articles, she said. I didn't recognize myself in them. No, I said. The woman who sided against her father isn't the one I raised. I know. Then why? She looked down at her hands. Because I wanted them to like me, the Davenports, their friends, their world. I thought I could belong to both worlds, yours and theirs. And I was wrong. When you pulled your support, half the people who congratulated me at the wedding stopped returning my calls. The club canceled my corporate mixer. Even Andrew's family stopped inviting me to dinners. Her voice trembled. I realized something. The people who stopped respecting me when your money left never respected me at all. I leaned back, studying her. What else did you realize? That you built something real, something that actually helps people. I traded that for a seat at a table full of ghosts. Emily, I said quietly, this isn't about money. I know, she said. It's about honor, about not being ashamed of the people who sacrificed for me. For a moment, I saw the child she used to be running to the door when I came home from deployment, wearing my dog tags around her neck, proud to call herself a soldier's daughter. What do you want from me? I asked. A chance to earn back your respect. However long it takes, whatever it requires. I stood and walked to the window. Below us, Norfolk Harbor shimmered with the movement of ships, precise, disciplined, purposeful. Respect, I said slowly, isn't something you earn once and keep forever. You demonstrate it every day. I understand. Do you? I turned. Because on that night, you had a choice: family loyalty or social acceptance. You chose the latter. I know, she whispered. And I was wrong. Yes, I said. But more importantly, you showed me who you are when the pressure is on. She swallowed hard. Then let me show you who I can become. I studied her face for a long time, the tears she was trying to hold back. She wasn't the same girl who'd humiliated me in front of 150 strangers. Maybe that girl had died in the fire she lit herself. Emily, I said, finally, we can rebuild our relationship, but it's going to be different. How different? No more choosing other people's comfort over family respect. No more apologizing for where you came from. And no more pretending that social status matters more than character. She nodded. I agree. And if you ever again stand beside someone who disrespects a veteran, any veteran, we're done permanently. She looked at me, eyes glistening. I understand, Dad. Maybe she did. Maybe she didn't. But some lessons are worth teaching twice. Then let's start over, I said. This time with clear expectations, respect, honor, and loyalty. She smiled faintly through her tears. Yes, sir. The first time she'd called me sir since she was 12 years old. I didn't know if forgiveness was possible, but I knew redemption starts with understanding the weight of what you've broken. And as the sun fell across the office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, not pride, not triumph, but peace. Peace born from boundaries. Peace born from silence. Because sometimes the only way to teach respect is to walk away from those who never learned it and let the silence do the talking. A year later, the world had moved on, but reputations hadn't. The Virginia Beach Country Club never fully recovered. Membership dropped by 40% within 6 months. The board issued a carefully worded statement about renewed commitment to inclusivity, but the damage was done. The veteran community had long memories, and veterans keep their word. Reynolds Defense Solutions, on the other hand, grew stronger than ever. Companies that once ignored my calls now sought partnerships. They'd seen what silence backed by integrity could do. My name had become a quiet standard, not loud, not dramatic, but unshakable. I didn't need revenge. Consequence was enough. One evening in late spring, I received a handwritten envelope, Emily's handwriting. Inside was a photograph, her standing beside a group of veterans at a local shelter. On the back, she'd written, I joined the outreach program you started. We serve dinner to homeless vets every Thursday. Thought you'd like to know. It was the first thing she'd sent me in months that didn't ask for forgiveness. It offered gratitude instead. 3 weeks later, she stopped by my house. No announcement, no text. Just a knock on the door and the familiar sound of her voice saying, Dad, it's me. I found her standing on the porch holding a folder and a bouquet of white lilies, her mother's favorite. She looked calm, not desperate, like someone who had learned to carry her mistakes without running from them. I came to return this, she said, handing me the folder. Inside was the $50,000 wedding check I'd given her that night uncashed. I never deposited it, she said. I couldn't. It didn't feel right. I studied her face. There was still guilt there, but also strength, the kind that grows from pain, not privilege. You didn't have to return it, I said. I know, but I needed to. We sat on the porch as the evening settled. The ocean air carried the smell of salt and rain. She talked about her work, how she'd left the marketing firm that worshipped image over ethics, how she'd started volunteering for veteran-owned businesses to rebuild her credibility. At first, people wouldn't take me seriously, she said. I was the woman who let her father get humiliated at her wedding. But I kept showing up. I listened. I learned. That's how you rebuild, I said quietly. Not by asking for forgiveness. By earning it, she smiled faintly. I learned something else too. What's that? That the difference between guilt and growth is what you do after the apology. For a moment, I didn't know what to say. Her words carried the kind of truth that doesn't come from books, only from regret. We sat in silence for a while, watching the horizon shift from gold to blue. The same horizon I'd looked at for decades, before deployments, after funerals, during moments when I wondered if all the sacrifice meant anything. Now I knew it did, because sitting beside me was proof that even broken things can be rebuilt if you stop trying to make them look new and let them stay scarred. I heard Andrew moved to Boston, I said. She nodded. He wanted the kind of life that looked perfect from the outside. I'm not built for that anymore. You're sure I'm sure. We didn't need to talk about the Davenports. They'd become ghosts in our story lessons, not villains. Victoria had resigned from 2 of her charity boards after donors withdrew support. The society pages stopped printing her photo. Silence had done what shouting never could. When the porch light flickered on, Emily stood and handed me another envelope. This is for you. Inside was a program for a scholarship fund, the Reynolds Fellowship for Veterans Families, established by Emily Reynolds in partnership with the Tidewater Veterans Association. The fund provided educational grants for the children of service members. I thought it was time to give back, she said softly. I wanted to do something that carried your name, but this time for the right reasons. I didn't trust my voice enough to answer, so I nodded. The pride that swelled in my chest was quiet, steady, nothing like the applause of a wedding crowd. It was the kind of pride you feel when someone finally understands what you've been trying to teach your whole life. She smiled, then hesitated. Do you think Mom would be proud of you? I said. Yes. Of both of us, maybe. Before she left, she reached into her purse and placed something on the table, my old pair of dog tags. The ones she used to wear around the house when she was little. I kept them, she said. They reminded me of who I used to be and who I want to be again. I turned the medal over in my hand, feeling the cool weight of it. My name, my blood type, my service number. Things that once defined my worth. Now they were just symbols not of war, but of endurance. After she drove away, I stayed on the porch for a long time. The night was still, the waves rhythmic against the shore. Somewhere in the distance, a ship's horn echoed low, patient, eternal. I thought about everything that had happened, the betrayal, the humiliation, the silence that followed. People assumed I'd done it out of pride, but pride fades. What remains is principle. Because respect, real respect, can't be begged for, bought, or borrowed. It has to be earned every single day. And sometimes, to remind the world of that, you have to be willing to walk away from the people you love most, not to punish them, but to let them grow. A year later, Emily and I still didn't talk every day. But when we did, the silence between us wasn't bitter anymore. It was comfortable, familiar, the kind of silence you share with someone who finally understands its value. Every Thursday, she sent me photos from the shelter veterans, laughing, sharing meal stories. In each picture, she wore my dog tags, not as decoration, but as belonging. The world had taken its time teaching her what honor really meant. But she'd learned. And in learning, she gave me something I hadn't expected: peace. Because in the end, that's what every soldier wants after the war. Not victory, not applause, just peace and someone who understands what it cost. The memorial stood on the edge of the bay, where the wind always smelled faintly of salt and memory. I hadn't been there in years. The granite wall curved like a half-folded wing, each name etched deep enough to outlast weather, politics, and time. I parked a few yards away and sat in the truck for a while, listening to the radio fade into static. A seagull cut across the morning light. The tide was low. It felt like the kind of day when the world holds its breath. I carried a small wooden box under my arm, the same box that had followed me through 25 years of service and another decade of civilian life. Inside were the things people thought defined me: the Purple Heart, the Bronze Star, the Combat Infantryman Badge. Proof that once I'd been willing to bleed for something bigger than myself. I walked to the wall. The sun had barely risen high enough to touch the surface, and the names glowed faintly gold against gray. I stopped at one near the center, Sergeant Daniel Pierce, 1980-2004. He'd been one of the three I dragged from the burning Humvee outside Fallujah. The explosion had rung in my ears for 6 months, but the silence afterward had lasted 2 decades. "Morning, Danny," I said quietly. "I figured you'd still be standing watch." For a while I just stood there, the box balanced in my hands, the wind tugging at my coat. Behind me, the world went on: cars on the highway, kids heading to school, joggers tracing their daily routes. That was the point, wasn't it? That life kept moving because someone had once held the line long enough for it to do so. When I opened the box, the metals caught the light. I ran a thumb over the Purple Heart. Cold metal, warm memory. I thought of the day the medic had pinned it to my chest. I was 29, half conscious, angry that I'd survived. I hadn't understood yet that surviving was its own mission. The Bronze Star came next. I remembered the day they'd given it to me in a hangar somewhere in Kuwait. The citation said heroism under fire. I remember thinking heroism looks a lot like luck from the inside. I took a deep breath and placed both medals at the base of the wall. The wind pushed against me, insistent like an old comrade, reminding me to stand straight. "I don't need these anymore," I murmured. "You earned them as much as I did." The box was lighter now, but my chest felt heavier. Not from regret, but from the weight of things finally put down. Behind me, gravel crunched. A familiar voice said, "You always did have a flair for ceremony, Dad." I turned. Emily was standing there, her hair pulled back, the same quiet determination I'd seen in her mother when she was young. She was holding 2 cups of coffee. "You forgot to tell me you were coming." "I didn't forget," I said. "I just wasn't sure you'd want to." She handed me a cup. "Mom used to say closure is a shared responsibility. You can't find it alone." We stood side by side in silence, sipping coffee that steamed in the cold air. "I saw the article about the scholarship fund," I said. "You've raised more in 6 months than I did in 2 years." She smiled. "It helps when people trust the story behind it." "And what story is that? That a soldier taught his daughter that silence is stronger than pride?" I let out a small laugh. "You always were good with words." She shook her head. "I was good at pretending. Now I'm just honest." We stood there for a long time, watching the water crawl across the sand. Then she reached into her coat pocket and took out a small object. "You left this at the office." It was my father's watch, the one I'd worn every deployment, the one that had stopped ticking the day I came home for the last time. "I thought I'd lost it years ago." "I had it repaired," she said. "Figured it should still keep time." I turned it over in my palm. The second hand moved steadily, indifferent to memory. "Why now?" I asked. "Because time doesn't stop for guilt," she said, and I was tired of letting it run without me. The wind shifted. She crouched down and brushed her fingers over the metals at the base of the wall. "You really leaving them here?" "They belong with the people who taught me what they meant," I said. "The rest of us just carry the echoes." Emily nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time I left something, too." From her pocket, she pulled the old dog tags she'd worn for months. They clinked softly as she laid them beside the metals. "For the record," she said, "I'm not ashamed of where I come from anymore." The words hit harder than any salute. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She already understood that silence between us had changed shape from punishment to peace. We stayed until the sky began to pale into afternoon. A few tourists passed by, reading names, leaving flowers. One little boy saluted the wall before running back to his parents. Emily watched him go. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked. "Service," I said. "Every day. But I don't miss the noise. Out there, you fight for survival. Here, you fight for meaning. And which one's harder?" The second, I said. "Surviving is instinct. Living with purpose takes choice." She looked at me for a long moment. "Then what's your purpose now?" I smiled. "To make sure you never forget yours." She didn't cry this time. She just nodded the way soldiers do when orders are understood. Then she hugged me, the kind of embrace that carries the weight of all the unspoken things between people who have finally forgiven each other. When she stepped back, she said, "You'll be at the scholarship dinner next month." "I will." "Good. They're giving out the first award." "I named it after Sergeant Daniel Pierce." I blinked. "You remembered his name. You mentioned him once when I was 10. I never forgot." She left a few minutes later, walking toward the parking lot, her posture straight, her stride certain. I turned back to the wall one last time. The wind lifted, carrying the distant hum of a ship's engine, a reminder that life never really stops, it just changes direction. I touched the stone where Daniel's name was carved. "Mission complete, Sergeant," I whispered. "You can stand down now." The metals gleamed faintly in the sunlight. The dog tags beside them swung gently in the breeze, clinking like distant bells. When I walked away, I didn't look back. Some things deserve the dignity of being left behind. For the first time since that wedding, the silence wasn't heavy. It was pure. And as the bay shimmered under the setting sun, I finally understood what every soldier spends his life chasing. Not victory, not forgiveness, but that single unbreakable moment of peace that comes when duty, pain, and love all speak the same language: silence.